However, I misjudged the situation. The sudden surge of foul-smelling water nearly overwhelmed me. A large fish glided silently from behind, its great back breaking the surface of the water, measuring nearly 1.5 meters from head to tail, with a large head and a small tail. Several soft whiskers brushed against my eye, causing goosebumps all over my body. This was definitely not a catfish. It must be a type of whiskered catfish, a kind of loach. There are many kinds of loaches, but they basically all prefer to eat the carcasses of rotten animals. The filthier the place, the fatter they get. Sometimes, when I was fishing in the pond, I came across them. Farmers would use the rotting corpses of pigs and dogs to feed them. Some would eat so much, they would swell up and die, causing the entire pond to reek and become sticky. A garbage fish through and through. I felt like I was suffocating underwater. This strange fish shouldn't be in Haijiang province. It looks like an Egyptian catfish, introduced from Thailand in 1981. I only saw a large dead specimen when I was in Fujian and hadn't retired yet. It had a wide mouth and long whiskers. Because it's fierce and large, it has become a disaster in Guangdong. But after retiring and hanging around Haijiang province for more than 3 years, I've never heard of such a large whiskered catfish in any reservoir. The whiskers of the garbage fish brushed against me, and then it turned and charged at me again, bringing up a foul odor that made me suspect if this thing had just eaten its fill. Regardless, as a fearless veteran, dealing with a freshwater fish is no problem at all. It's hard to exert force in the water, and besides, this thing has no scales, making it difficult to get. But I'm not just holding a diving knife for show. I can definitely hurt it. After a second of consideration, I decided to stab its eyes. I'm bigger than it is, not afraid of being swallowed by its mouth. The dark loach swam quickly in the water. As soon as my knife was ready, I saw the loach suddenly stop, and its entire body retreated backward. What's going on? Fish sacrifice speed when they swim backward, and speed is precisely the hallmark of a fish's survival. Even catfish that swim backward do so on their backs. But how does this thing retreat so smoothly? With a flash of the flashlight, I saw behind the loach, in the swamp, a series of dark shadows jumping and hopping, densely packed after entering the water. A bunch of toads, tangled into knots, the color like that of old manure, with bulging eyes that all emitted a red glow. I panicked, surfaced, grabbed my knife, and turned to run. The loach seemed to burst the belly of a toad in the struggle, splashing blood droplets that stung my face terribly. I touched my face and found a series of large blisters. Before I could swim too far, the loach was on its back, covered with hundreds of toads of all sizes. Its belly swelled and deflated like leeches sucking blood. And when the toads dispersed, what was left was unrecognizable. No longer any object. No longer its original appearance. I was really scared this time. The swamp was a man-eating swamp. Even the toads were poisonous. And it couldn't possibly be something from this reservoir. I shouted and swam desperately towards the boat. In the chaos, my emotions almost got out of control. When I climbed onto the boat, exhausted, I suddenly remembered that someone was spying on Chief Gu from a hidden place. I hurriedly got up, but there was no one at the bow. Chief Gu had disappeared without a trace. Only the shotgun was still lying quietly on the deck. At this time, it was almost dawn, and the cool breeze before dawn felt chilly. Although it was spring, it was piercingly cold. The lake water was still calm, and many things had happened in a short night. Zheng Jian and his people totally hung off the boat for no reason. And Chief Gu was also missing. Especially Chief Gu gave me a sense of great danger, and the person who spied on him might have put him in the water, with no trace of bones. Thinking about this boat, there are only a few people left in the cockpit, but Chief Gu said, and I am a lone ghost wondering, isn't Zheng Jian supposed to come back at dawn? Why hasn't there been any news yet? All the information about Zheng Jian was heard from Chief Gu. I didn't hear any of it myself, and I didn't see it with my own eyes. Only the personal experience at the bottom of the water can be said to be true. So I couldn't help but walk towards the cockpit, not knowing whether I wanted to verify Chief Gu's words or find some clues. The door of the cockpit was indeed locked, and I looked at the lock, which was not for civilians. Quite complicated. I shook my head and climbed onto the top of the cabin, holding the iron bars nailed outside the window. Looking down from the top, it might be due to the difference in temperature, and there was a layer of frost on the glass. The cabin was foggy and unclear. I breathed for a while before there was a round hole to look in. The temperature in the cabin seemed to be relatively high, and it was a bit dirty. I looked for a while and didn't find any signs of people. Could they have fallen asleep? It should be time to wake up at daybreak. Just as I was about to knock hard on the skylight, I heard the sound of someone knocking on the door of the cabin below, as if someone was desperately trying to get out from the inside. I hurriedly looked for the location of the door from the skylight, but was just blocked by an iron bar, and I couldn't see who was knocking on the door. I was anxious and couldn't help but pound on the skylight. The knocking on the door below immediately stopped, and there was no movement around. I was impatient, put my face on the skylight and try hard to look inside again. As soon as I put it on, a face quietly stuck to the inside of the skylight, just opposite my nose. And I was careless for a while and was too close and didn't realize that I was sticking to a face. When I realized it, I quickly raised my head, adjusted the focus of my eyes to the near place, and took a look. I finally couldn't help but groan. This face is quite strange. I say it's strange because when we first arrived, we had already seen a flattened face in the water, and the position of the facial features was awkward, but it was far away, separated by the lake water. And it was not terrifying, but the face I saw now is close at hand, separated by a piece of glass. If it weren't for the iron bar, I believe I would definitely slap it. The most peculiar thing about this face is the layout of the facial features. At first glance, it seems okay, but if you count it carefully, it's not right. When I was in the army, I watched a shadow play and went backstage out of curiosity. I saw the props that hadn't been on stage yet. Now this face is similar to that because the shadow is made by sticking half faces together. The audience can only see half, so the head split in the middle, except for the eyes in the roughly correct position. The nose, mouth, and chin are all on the edge. The face staring at me on the glass is like this, and I can see the skin texture clearly. It uses the authentic hollow out paper cutting technique, with only a layer of varnish on the outside. Generally speaking, the design rules of shadow face patterns are: black is loyal, red is fierce, flower is brave, white is treacherous, yang is positive, and yin is evil. But what I saw was completely colorless and transparent, very similar to being made of human skin. Why? Because the eyes of this face are real eyeballs. The only three-dimensional feeling on this strange face, the two black eyeballs, are staring straight at me. Could there be any magic? Can it turn the props of shadow play into real people and send them into this cockpit for what? This face stared at me for only a few seconds. The eyeballs turned left and right, and then it shrank rapidly with a bang until it became a palm-sized piece of paper before falling off the glass. This strange shadow face has been around for some time. At a glance, I knew it wasn't just made. In my mind, I suddenly remembered something Chief Gu had said. He mentioned in a chat that during the Republic of China, the warlord Sun Dardua, also known as Sun Chuanfang, had once dispatched troops to block the Tiancong cave upstream. It is said that he also sent several opera troops with gongs and drums. Could this troop be performing shadow play? I was thinking about it, but I still didn't understand who was knocking on the door inside. The whole boat started to shake, shaking constantly. I was lying on the skylight, a bit unstable. I held the iron bars with all my strength, and I didn't want to fall into the water. Thinking about the toads in the swamp, I still felt nauseous, and the big blisters on my face were more and more painful. In the midst of the bussiness, I turned my head and saw a familiar person standing on the swamp in the lake. In broad daylight, I recognized him at a glance. Who else could it be but Chief Gu? This guy was kneeling on one leg on the swamp, covered in mud, staring at me on the top of the boat. I shouted, "Chief Gu, how did you get up there? Don't move, I'll save you." Chief Gu didn't make a sound and still looked at me foolishly. I was a bit worried, trying to look around him. No poisonous toads, and no slender and thin figure spying on him, which made me feel a little more at ease. Lying on the top of the cockpit, I couldn't figure out the situation in the water below for a while, and I didn't dare to jump into the water rashly. I was at a loss. All my abilities were only displayed in the water. Without water, I was just a retired veteran with a good body. I couldn't understand why the boat was shaking. What happened in the cockpit? I was eager to see Chief Gu. Maybe he could tell me something. I looked at the distance between the swamp and measured the height of the stone mountain. Chief Gu tightly held my wrist. "Brother, you can't leave me behind. It seems you want to climb the mountain by yourself." "I can't do it. My leg seems to be broken. If you leave, I'm done for the sake of being on the same boat. Don't leave me alone." I looked at him. His face was sincere, a desire for life. I shook off his hand. "No, I just praised you as a man." "Why are you crying? Don't you have a lot of secrets you don't want to tell?" "Looking at your leg, even if I go into this water curtain cave with you, I can't carry you on my back, right? Don Swan Wei could sacrifice himself to blow up the bunker. We can't fall behind." Chief Gu hurriedly said, "It's not a water curtain cave inside. I really don't need you to carry me. Once inside, as long as you find a dry place for me, I'll tell you everything I know. Besides, even if you climb to the top of the stone mountain, there may not be a road. I don't know anything else, but I can tell you one thing for sure. Zheng Jian and his people must have also entered this cave." I hesitated for a moment, and I didn't plan to leave him behind. I just wanted to test him to see if Chief Gu knew some inside information. After all, he is also a cadre of the local fisheries department, and he knows more about the reservoir than outsiders. But I didn't expect that this guy really had something in his stomach. So let's go into the cave together. Anyway, I'm good at swimming, and I'm not afraid of him making trouble. I helped Chief Gu tore off some clothes and tied them tightly above his knee, causing him to grimace and shout in pain. I looked at the wound. It didn't seem to be bitten by any animal. When I lifted it to the knee, I saw that there was no blood at the wound, no bruising or swelling, but the whole knee was white, very white, with a black mark protruding, like a big mole, with a tuft of hair on it, looking very disgusting. Gu and Li Heng must have both guessed that there was something strange about the material of the cabinet, and they both stood a few steps back in unison. I said, "Look at how timid you two are. Even if it's really made of human skin, it's been decades, and it's long dead. What's there to be afraid of?" Gu looked a bit embarrassed. "It's not fear, it's that this thing is really eerie. I just thought about how I was panting on it a while ago, and I don't know if my mouth touched it or not. It's really disgusting." Li Heng said, "There's just something wrong with this portrait. Why is there such a portrait? Looking at the age, it's just over 30. Could it have something to do with this cabinet? I can't figure it out," I said with a smile. "Have you noticed that the woman in the portrait looks a bit like you? Both of you are very beautiful." Haha. Li Heng ignored me, took the photo and walked up to compare it. "Huan Ning, don't just talk nonsense. I think this photo should be stuck somewhere." There's a gap at the bottom of the cabinet. Gu and I walked up to have a look. We were just paying attention to the bottom of the cabinet and hadn't really looked at the cabinet yet. Li Heng frowned. "It's not right. The photo is stuck halfway. As if something is blocking it. You just stand back. I think it seems to be some kind of spring." I hurriedly stopped her. No, we two big men. How can we let you take the risk? Get out of the way. Let me do it." Li Heng looked at me, hesitated for a moment, and handed me the photo. "You slide it in along the edge. There's an area with some elasticity. Be careful." I took the photo. It really had something covering both sides, making the whole photo quite rigid, and there were some irregular serrated edges at the bottom. It was hard to imagine how this thing could be inserted into the gap at the bottom of the cabinet. I slid the photo along the edge of the gap, and when I touched what seemed like a spring, I suddenly felt a chill in my heart, remembering something. The Soviet old guys, their purpose for this laboratory was to cultivate some kind of monster, and they kept a portrait of a woman at the bottom of the cabinet. Wouldn't it suggest that there was something else in the cabinet besides the culture fluid? I think it's likely the woman in the photo. If I recklessly triggered some mechanism, I released something terrifying, and if this thing had some inexplicable poise, wouldn't we all suffer? This thought flashed through my mind, but my hand still trembled as I forcibly inserted the photo into the gap. The serrated edge at the bottom caught on something elastic, and with a firm press down, there was a soft click, and the photo fitted perfectly into the bottom of the cabinet. I stepped back and carefully observed for any changes, but nothing happened. I went up and tried to lift the bottom of the cabinet with my hand, and the photo popped out of the gap again, facing me. I panicked, thinking something had come out, and almost cursed out loud. Oh, I understood. When I climbed over the cabinet from the top just now, I saw the face of the woman's portrait, and now it has turned over, and the photo is still facing me with the front side. Could it be that I put it in the wrong direction? I took out the photo, turned it over, and inserted it again. There was movement. As soon as the photo was completely inserted, I heard a series of clicks. The bottom of the cabinet is indeed a movable grid. As soon as the photo was inserted, a delicate handle popped out quickly. The original designer must have been very creative. Could it be that every time you get this handle, you need to use the portrait? The bottom of the cabinet is actually divided into two parts. Now, this handle that pops out is just a slot. I think there must be a mystery, and it might be a trap that harms people. If we can get it so easily, it's really unreasonable and doesn't fit the design of any experimental cabinet. The number of the cabinet is 7. God knows how many numbers there are before and after. If each cabinet corresponds to a portrait, I can almost be sure that there is a disfigured corpse inside the cabinet, especially the several ferocious buds that grow on the upper part of the cabinet, which make me think about what they are used for. Those so-called culture fluids may be toxic if we keep digging to find out. Isn't it self-inflicted and harmful to ourselves? I hesitated to grab the handle, quite indecisive about whether to pull it or not. After a fierce struggle between curiosity and concern, the concern finally took the upper hand. In the end, I didn't pull the handle but gently pressed it back down, and the woman's portrait immediately popped out. I held the portrait and said to them with self-mockery, "Hey, I think we'd better not try it. If it's hard work and brings trouble, it's not worth it." Gu and Li Heng were both very nervous and staring at me, and they would run away at any time if something happened. I said, with a mix of anger and laughter, "It seems that I'm the one to block the gun hole. Well, I don't have the courage either. Let's continue to move forward and get out as soon as possible." Unexpectedly, Li Heng and Gu were staring at the portrait in my hand, speechless. I was also stunned and didn't know what had happened. I only heard Gu say, "Don't move first." I didn't believe that I would be hit because I didn't pull the handle at all. How could something happen? But Li Hong almost called out to me at the same time. Huan Ning, really don't move first. There's something wrong with the portrait. You wait for me to take a look. I subconsciously believed in Li Hong, the young lady. Hearing her say so, I knew that what Gu said was not false, and I immediately became stiff all over, and even the hand holding the portrait trembled slightly, standing there and not daring to move. The corner of my eye couldn't help but look at the portrait in my hand. Something strange happened. At first, we all thought that the eyes of the portrait were definitely gray, as if something was pasted on it. But now in such a short time, the eyes were no longer gray. The eyes were all dark, with a flowing luster, as if they were looking at me. And I immediately felt a chill in my heart. Could there really be ghosts in the world? Almost at the same time, I felt the fingers holding the portrait suddenly became cool, and in an instant, it felt like they were on fire, with a sudden burning pain. I couldn't help but scream and threw the portrait out. It hit the stone wall in front and fell to the ground. I covered my hand and squatted down. The sudden burning pain felt a lot better after I threw out the portrait. I looked at the place where the sudden pain was, and there was a faint blue round mark on the back of my hand. I couldn't see whether it was on the surface of the skin or in the flesh, which was a bit strange, but it didn't feel bad. I was very fortunate that I didn't open that damn cabinet. The photo had only been in it for a while, and it had brought out such a terrifying feeling. If I really pulled the handle, wouldn't I have made a big mistake? Gu immediately came over to look at the back of my hand, but didn't dare to touch it. He just clicked his tongue and looked at it over and over again, which annoyed me. Go away. Where it's fun, stay there. Look at your happy little face. Be careful I hit you. Gu walked away with a sly face, and I could see that he was very scared. I was a bit unhappy, and Li Hong didn't care either. After all, I was hit for everyone, but she wanted to pick up the portrait by herself, which made me feel very uncomfortable. Li Hong didn't pick up the portrait with her fingers, but squatted down very cautiously to observe it. I was also very strange in my heart. Why did the portrait change after being inserted into the gap at the bottom of the cabinet? Could it be that this cabinet still has some mysterious things alive? Thinking of this, I walked up and patted Li Hong on the shoulder. Get up. Don't look. This cabinet has a problem. Let's hurry up and go. Don't make a long night and a dream. I'm temporarily okay. Go back and check it. You must not touch this portrait. It's very evil. Li Hong didn't move or respond to me. I stepped back 2 steps and called again. What's wrong with you? Talk quickly. Li Hong's gaze was still focused on the photo on the ground. Gu also saw something was wrong and immediately shrank to the side, no longer making a sound, just silently watching. I took out my knife, watching the portrait on the ground, and Li Hong spoke with her back to me. It's okay. I just want to take the photo back for research. Look, the eyes are gray again. It's really strange. Huan Ning, what happened to you just now? Why did you scream? I looked at the photo, and the woman's eyes had indeed returned to the original dark gray, becoming lifeless. And I couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief and said with a wry smile, it's good that you're okay. I should have been hit. I don't know what it is, and it left a mark on my hand. Li Hong wanted to reach out and take the photo, but I quickly stopped her. No, since I've already been hit, I'll do it. I quickly rolled up the photo and put it in my pocket. I really couldn't trust others with this thing. After all, the light blue circular mark was on the back of my hand. I said that this thing is neither painful nor itchy. Just like it's not there, just ignore it. And it's better to go out and go to the hospital as soon as possible. Li Hong looked at the back of my hand and was also at a loss about what it was. I said, this thing is neither painful nor itchy. Just like it's not there. So just ignore it, and it's better to go out and go to the hospital as soon as possible. Li Hong looked at my face with concern. I reached out to flip my eyelids. I dodged a little embarrassedly and said, it's okay. Let's go quickly. Indeed, although I said this a bit anxiously, it was the truth. This cabinet was behind me, and just a strange woman's photo had been tossed around for a long time, making me feel uneasy and suspicious that I had been poisoned by some kind of bacteria. Thinking of the strange parasites that once grew on Gu's toes made my hair stand on end, and I just wanted to go out and go to the hospital quickly. Looking up, the light from the gap where Li Hong fell was still far away, but the road was not difficult to walk. As long as we put in more effort, we could climb up quickly, even if it was raining nights outside. I wanted to go out and see the sun. I had been in the stone cave for too long, and I was so depressed that I wanted to hit the wall. Seeing the dawn of victory ahead, Gu took the lead and crawled forward. Seeing his figure, his leg injury had healed a lot. After crawling for not far, something on the right side attracted everyone's attention. It was a shiny, metallic small cylinder. Gu saw it first and immediately said in a low voice, I've seen this thing. Gu went over and brought one back to show me. There were several small holes in a row on it. I tried to turn it and was startled, and my palm was full of cold sweat. It turned out that this thing was a very exquisite small deep water bomb. The holes on the warhead are used to determine the depth of the explosion. Water will flow into the fuse room from the holes. The deeper it dives, the greater the water pressure it receives, and the closer the striker and detonator get. When the pressure is reached, the striker punctures the detonator, and the deep water bomb explodes. I held this exquisite deep water bomb, and after being startled, I realized that I was scaring myself. I had studied deep water bombs carefully when I was a soldier before. Seeing it made so exquisitely, unless there are some tricks I don't know, it will definitely not explode for the time being. But then I thought, if this thing was indeed just put down not long ago, then there are at least 2 so-called fugitive hunters who have been here besides us. I asked Gu to recognize whether it was this thing he had seen at the time, and Gu took it over and looked at it again and again, saying it was this. No mistake. I said, it seems there will be more situations ahead. We must all be careful. Don't be knocked down by the darkness before dawn. That would be too much of a loss. I didn't dare to carry this small bomb on me. If I accidentally fell into the water and caused an accident, wouldn't I become a human bomb? After thinking about it again and again, although I like this thing very much, there is no time to dismantle the fuse now. No matter how reluctant I am, I can only leave it behind. Carefully, I wedged the small bomb in a sturdy rock and came back to continue walking forward with them. Seeing victory in sight, the light in the stone crack is getting brighter and brighter, and we all breathe a sigh of relief. It seems that as long as we climb up and see the sun, we will definitely be saved. But for a while, we forgot that there might still be Xingjian's team on the stone mountain, and those 2 young officers who were chasing fugitives are also there. Most importantly, the guy with gills behind his ears may also be spying on us in the dark. After a short rest and walking a few meters, I grabbed Gu. If you don't look at the road and just walk blindly, it's easy to have problems. I grabbed Gu for a reason. Walking in the dim light. Of course, you have to observe all aspects and listen to all directions, because there is a person sitting against the stone wall ahead, a bit blurry, and you can't see that appearance and clothing clearly. You can only see him sitting against the wall with his legs stretched up very far, twisted and deformed, and one arm is raised, seemingly trying to resist something, while the other arm is hanging on the side. Another dead person. Gu's legs softened, and if I didn't hold him, he would have Saturday on the ground. Look at how you are. I mocked him. It's not the first time I've seen this situation, and I'm already numb from the stimulation. I stopped and frowned, staring at that person for a while, and I understood. Pushing Gu, you are really silly. It's just a pile of ashes, but this ash is quite strange. There is indeed just a pile of ashes, posing as a lifelike human shape. I think it might be a coincidence, and at first glance, it really looks like a person. Let's not care. Hurry up and go. Gu really couldn't bear this atmosphere. Although it was just a pile of ashes, it was too much like a dead person. Li Hong and I didn't think so. In this dim and damp place, there shouldn't be a pile of ashes. In case there is something strange, it would be bad if caught off guard. When we got closer and took a closer look, it was indeed a pile of ashes. But this human-shaped ash was not dry ash, but a bit sticky and stuck to the wall. And there seemed to be some bits of flesh and bone on it, which is more like a shadow on the wall. A sense of foreboding rose in my heart. Could it be that there was originally a person here? Was he attacked, and his skin and clothes were all roasted dry, leaving only a little residue stuck to the wall? I carefully let them not approach, and I looked around the shadow carefully. In a short while, I found the problem. The posture of this person-shaped shadow is problematic. This gentleman Saturday against the wall, with his legs twisted and deformed, one hand struggling at the top of his head, but the other hand was hanging not quite normal, and the 5 fingers on the palm were clenched into a fist, with only the index finger extended, pointing to a place in front obliquely, just like pointing to something. I followed the direction of the finger, gently moved my steps, and finally, my gaze fell in a place, which was a recess in the stone wall, with a few irregular stones stuck on the surface, and there was nothing else in this direction, and this seemed to be a bit problematic, and it seemed to be deliberately placed. I took out my diving knife and gently removed 3 stones, revealing a corner of a book inside, which should be something hidden. I quickly took out this thing, and it turned out to be a black letter notebook. I was overjoyed when I saw it. This is the first time I've seen a real clue. If it records all the answers to these questions, it would be great news. At least I can understand what the 2 blue dots on the back of my hand mean. I opened the notebook with joy, flipped through it a few times, and it was still intact. It seemed to have been hidden here recently, but as soon as I tried to read it, my expression immediately became serious, and I closed the notebook without looking at it again. Gu and the others looked at me in amazement and finally grabbed it, opened it, and immediately laughed. It turns out to be Russian. I had to wait for them to translate the general meaning for me. In 1985, Comrade Lauka just took office as the captain of the Soviet Union. At that time, many people at home and abroad said that he was a traitor, and the situation in the country was gradually chaotic, and the situation was very bad. Moreover, the independence movements of various republics were very turbulent, and Sino-Soviet relations were in a subtle period of gradual warming. This notebook was written by a Chinese person whose identity cannot be revealed for the time being, and it is not a big figure. But this person was sent to the Far East region of the Soviet Union to perform some special tasks before Lauka took office, which seemed to be about territorial return. He stayed in the Far East for more than 3 years, and the notebook did not mention how the task was completed. He said that he found some clues. That is, 30 years ago, when Soviet experts helped to build the Xinjiang Reservoir Dam, they had a series of secret astonishing experiments. After much inquiry, this person finally found out from an old expert who participated in the construction at that time, and after some hard and soft methods, he learned some inside stories of the experiments. It turned out that the Soviet experts strongly recommended the construction of the dam here for another purpose, that is, to seal many laboratories forever. And the purpose of sealing was to prevent the uncontrollable consequences of the experiments. As for what the consequences of the experiments were, no one knew the details, because each researcher of the experiment only knew his own small part of the work and had no chance to understand the overall experiment. This gentleman couldn't bear the curiosity in his heart, and after returning to the country, he came to the reservoir to explore the truth privately. However, according to his own data, he had been wandering at the bottom of the reservoir for more than half a month, and only figured out that there were many laboratories of the Soviets, and one of the largest laboratories was submerged at the bottom of the mountain range, which was difficult to enter with private strength. After thinking left and right, the matter off whether the whirlpool had completely stopped, and went straight to the door of the concrete building, disappearing in a flash. While Li Han followed me closely, and I said with emotion, "I'm fine, comrade. You have such a good heart, and you are also very beautiful. I don't know if you have a boyfriend now. Do you want Brother Huang to introduce a partner for you?" As soon as I finished speaking, I twisted my ankle and kicked a protruding stone block, and I fell forward with a whoosh. The cold and hard ground knocked me out, and it took a while for my head to recover. When I opened my eyes, there was no one around me, and even Li Heng was gone. I was lying on the dark and cold concrete ground all by myself, and my heart was so cold that I almost blew up my lungs in anger. After falling, no one took care of me, so they gave me up so quickly. Let me fend for myself here. What kind of people are they? Suppressing the pounding heart, I slowly sat up and looked around. What's wrong? Could it be that I was transported somewhere else while I was unconscious? This is clearly the concrete building I just saw. Not far ahead, there was a large cabinet on the ground, and next to it stood 3 people. When they heard me wake up, they all turned their heads together. I saw that it was Ding, Du, and Li Han, and my heart calmed down. They didn't leave me alone, but I was suspicious. I patted my head and shouted, "Ding, when did you come? Have I been unconscious for a long time? Why didn't you come to help me?" Ding came over and looked at me but didn't pick up my words. "Old Juan, why are you in such poor health that you fall after a fall? Let me tell you, Li Heng is really amazing. The riddle of the abyss has been solved. Come and have a look." After that, he dragged me and ran. My foot was so painful that I couldn't help shouting, "You guy, let go quickly. Your foot is going to break my foot neck." Ding ignored me, took 3 steps at a time, and dragged me to the side of the cabinet. I looked down and saw a body lying face down in the cabinet, with a wide and disproportionate body, and there was not an inch of skin on it, all bare, showing bright red muscles and blood vessels, which was very dazzling. At this time, my foot didn't hurt anymore, and I wanted to turn over the body to see who it was. Then, Ding reached out and grabbed my wrist tightly, making me unable to move, and his expression was even more strange, with a smile that was not quite a smile. Gu said next to him, "Huang Ning, what good things have you done? You know it in your heart. You have done all the bad things, such as seeing someone die without helping, throwing stones after falling into a well, and disassembling the bridge after crossing the river. It's all because of you that we are all going to die here together." Ding, like a puppet, mechanically used the other hand to turn over the body that was lying down, and I saw it was old instructor Deng Jianhua, which made me horrified. And under Deng Jianhua, there was another person sleeping on his back, with his face skin just peeled off halfway, and I knew this person too. It was Deng Jianhua's buddy, Luo Dui. Gu said, "The treasure of this laboratory must be a living sacrifice to let us go. Comrade Xiaohuang, I'm sorry. You might as well do a good deed and help everyone." I listened to him patiently, and suddenly, 2 figures rushed over and held my shoulders. I desperately twisted my head and wanted to see who they were, but I couldn't see anyone. I only saw Li Han sobbing on the side, and I was annoyed Why are you crying? Hurry up and persuade Gu. Is he crazy? My head was buzzing, and I thought, what's going on today? Ding is my best friend, and he has always been on the same side as me. Why did he change his personality today and learn to plot behind my back? I really can't believe it. Gu frowned and thought for a while, waved his hand, and 2 more people in military uniforms came over. When they got closer, I saw that they were the handsome soldiers in Soviet uniforms. It turned out that this guy was actually a KGB agent, and he was full of lies to me, and they were all in the same group. Full of anger, I could only watch the 2 young soldiers push a person close to the cabinet. The poor woman was kicked and beaten, pressed into a head-down position, with blood seeping from her mouth, struggling, as if she was cursing. I couldn't bear to see this and said, "What are you going to do? Come at me." Seeing that no one paid attention to me, I scolded Ding. "Ding, you're good. You've done such a despicable thing with me, your friend. Are you still a person?" Gu kicked me aside and said with a smile, "Save your energy. It's your turn next. Ding is now my man." Do you think the Soviets are fools? They will leave such an important treasure here for you." As he spoke, the 2 soldiers rushed up and pressed the woman to the side of the cabinet. One of them took out a shiny pig-killing knife and, without saying a word, stabbed it into the woman's bulging chest. Then he made a reverse cut on the artery in her neck. The desperate woman struggled for a few times on the edge of the cabinet and finally lay down facing the cabinet. A strange thing emerged in the blood, which was an ancient bronze mirror with dragons and phoenixes entwined. Very exquisite, surprisingly. The side facing me was pitch black, reflecting nothing, with a bit of fog rotating slowly inside. Gu turned the dead woman and cut off a piece of her finger, sprinkled some blood on the mirror, and with a puff, the fog in the mirror immediately dissipated, and a scene like a movie appeared. A woman with disheveled hair was shaking her head back and forth, being pressed against a cabinet, and a person who pressed her took out a knife and stabbed her to death, causing blood to splash everywhere. The mirror was full of bright red and gradually returned to dimness, and the fog in the dark slowly gathered again. This was the scene of the woman just being killed. Gu and Ding were both laughing foolishly, looking crookedly at me with ill intent. I immediately understood that this mirror is likely to be a treasure, which can reflect the scene of a person's last moment before death. This is really mysterious. Could it be that they want to try the mirror with me? I never knew that trying the mirror was such a method, and a burst of anger surged from my heart. Anger rose from the heart, and evil sprang to the side of the gall. I gritted my teeth, and with a strong kick of my legs, "Hey!" I stood up. A knife appeared in my hand, which was handed to me by Li Hung with a considerate look, and with an encouraging look in her eyes. I gritted my teeth, raised the knife, and chopped down at Gu's head. With a clang, my knife was blocked by someone, and I was almost faint from the shock. When I opened my eyes, I saw Li Hung looking surprised, with tears in her eyes, and she exclaimed, "Huan Ning, what's wrong with you? Why do you suddenly pull out a knife to kill Gu?" I was shocked and looked closely. I was still under the sun on the stone mountain, and Gu was sitting in front of me, shivering. What's going on? I was confused again. Li Hung called out anxiously, "Huan Ning, what's wrong with you? Speak quickly. Don't you have a nightmare?" I patted my dizzy head and looked at Li Hung in confusion. "Didn't you put the knife in my hand?" I looked around again. There was no big cabinet, no Ding, no other people. The reservoir was still the reservoir. Where was the concrete house? I suddenly realized in my heart that everything just now was caused by hallucinations. Damn it. I quickly moved to Gu's side and apologized. "Comrade Gu, I'm sorry. I was confused just now, and I offended you greatly. Alas, this is a big deal, and I didn't expect to fall asleep. I'm really very, very sorry. Comrade Gu is magnanimous. Please forgive me this time." Gu's face was very bad, but there was nothing he could do, and he muttered, "You're really playing big. Don't care. I'm fine. Let's hurry up and act." I sighed helplessly, and it was very strange that I, who never dreamed, fell asleep in the middle of the day today, and even had such a strange dream. Wait, I suddenly remembered that Gu mentioned that the 2 pursuers had quarreled about Tiankong, bronze mirrors, gems, and other things. Why did I really dream of a bronze mirror? I pondered and asked Li Hung, "Have you ever heard of any strange mirrors that can show the scene of a person's last moment before death?" Li Hung was a bit confused. "Bronze mirror, show the scene of the last moment before death. What is that?" Gu suddenly took over the conversation. "Are you talking about the mirror of the sea? It's the only bronze mirror related to water. I've heard about it, and I've looked it up in books. It's all an ancient legend, and it can't be believed." Gu told us that there is a book that records the mirror of the sea, which can see strange fish and all reefs 100 miles away, which is very magical. However, the back of this mirror also has a special feature, which can show the scene of a person's last moment before death. No one knows how to use it anymore. Even if it doesn't have this ability, it can see strange fish and reefs 100 miles away, which is more powerful than satellites and radar, and it's naturally impossible. I nodded in agreement, feeling that it made sense. Gu has been in the reservoir for a long time and has really worked hard on the treasures used in the water. He is a model of loving his job, and it seems that my dream was just a random and blind dream. I looked at the sky, and I didn't sleep for a long time. The sun has not shown any intention of going down, and it's still early from nightfall. I stood up and stretched my muscles and bones, feeling refreshed, but my stomach was getting more and more hungry. The three of us, who had struggled all night, swayed to the other side of the stone mountain, which was where Gu and I stood on the swamp, and slipped into the gap. Now we can't distinguish the north, south, east, and west at all. We can only go to the side of the water with fewer islands, because we all remember that the water area where we stopped the boat for the night was facing the stone mountain, and there were not many islands. As for the idea of climbing to the top of the mountain, it was basically abandoned. One is that there is no time, and the other is that there are too many cracks and gaps between these stones, and we don't want to fall in carelessly. Following the moon, after a few stinky sweats, we finally came to a water area with no islands in front of us, and the boat we came here was slanting at the foot of the mountain, which should be stranded. Cheering, we ran down the mountain. After a few steps, I slowed down and asked them not to rush. You all slow down. The boat can't fly away. I still had something to tell you. When they stopped, I panted and told them about my experience on the boat, which made Gu keep retracting his feet, although he was not very limping, and his toes were not very smooth. While hesitating, a gust of hot wind blew over the water, and the wind was quite strong, as if some sand had blown into my eyes. I quickly lowered my head to rub my eyes, but the more I rubbed them, the more uncomfortable they became, and I wanted to cry. In my mind, I couldn't help but think of the woman in the portrait, her expressionless and gray eyes, and my heart was shocked, feeling as if something was wrong. I opened my eyes, and it was bad. The open water area on the water seemed to be about to form a whirlpool. I quickly blinked my eyes, fearing that I was dreaming again. But it was not a dream. It was true. But it's not a whirlpool at all. Just a very smooth angle of inclination, like an open-mouthed flat-bottom pot, slightly trembling in the wind. I looked at it crookedly, wondering if it was an illusion caused by the pain in my eyes for a while, and the water surface really became flat again. I closed my eyes and tried again. No, I felt that my eyelids were different from usual. Generally speaking, the action of blinking is the result of the joint efforts of the upper and lower eyelids. Why do I feel that this last action of closing my eyes obviously only has the lower eyelid turning up to cover the eyeball, and the upper eyelid doesn't move? What's going on? I blinked again, and still, only the lower eyelid turned up, so I quickly touched it with my hand. The lower eyelid was hard, and it seemed that there was something inside, which made me anxious. Don't let it be something like gills, right? If that's the case, won't I become a monster and die soon? Gu and the others saw me standing in a daze and looked at me suspiciously. I quickly turned around and rubbed my eyes, saying, "It's okay. It's just that the sand is in my eyes, and it will be fine after rubbing." I was afraid that people would find out something was wrong with my eyelids, and the thought of being on the dissection table for research made me shiver with fear. While rubbing my eyes and talking, the hum of the helicopter rotor came from the sky, and I quickly looked up against the sunlight to see what was happening. It was true. A G-5 helicopter was flying from far to near, and the sound was getting louder and louder, and the water surface had already been blown into waves, rising and falling. Shaking, is this helicopter here to rescue us? The helicopter circled around the stone mountain where we were standing, and the three of us shouted and waved our arms with all our might. There were no big trees on this bare stone mountain, and the people on the helicopter must have seen us. After circling twice, it stopped in midair, seemingly about to drop something. I saw that the helicopter stopped above the tilted boat, and I secretly exclaimed that it was bad. If it dropped any supplies on the boat, wouldn't we still have to take the risk to go to the boat to get it? Following the rope under the helicopter, a person quickly slid down, followed by several heavy big backpacks, all falling on the deck. Watching the person move his limbs, I felt very familiar, and my heart moved. This person seemed to be my best friend, Dane, and this guy finally came. I was shouting while running quickly towards the direction of the boat, both surprised and worried that he didn't know the situation, and was caught off guard by some kind of monster on the boat. Under the helicopter, another person slid down, a woman, and Dean was helping her land safely with both hands up. The road down the mountain was very bumpy, and I had to keep an eye out so as not to fall into the stone crevices. In such a delay, I saw Dean waving to me, and then he and the woman went into the cabin. I was really anxious and shouted, "Oh, Dean, you son of a gun, get out for me quickly." The distance was a bit far, and the rotor of the helicopter made a harsh rumbling sound, completely covering my roar. I continued to approach the boat quickly, and suddenly the sky brightened. unusually bright, and I couldn't help but stop and look up at what was happening in the sky. The rising helicopter was frowned in the air, trembling slightly, and then a dazzling white light bulb burst open suddenly. I hurriedly covered my eyes with my hand to block the dazzling white light. It's not good. The plane is going to explode. The dazzling light ball only lasted for a very short time, and after the light ball disappeared, the helicopter was gone without a trace, without the traces of explosion debris, and without the loud sound of falling into the water. It just disappeared inexplicably in midair. Right under our eyes, everything was dead silent, quiet, and then there was a loud noise from the cabin, followed by a few muffled gunshots, which were particularly low in the silence. The three of us looked at each other, uncertain and astonished, not knowing what had happened. Everything came too fast and suddenly, and it was a bit eerie, making people unable to keep up, and the brain was a bit slow to respond. How could the helicopter suddenly disappear? It's more terrifying than a big change in a living person, with no fire of explosion, no sound of falling, but there is still a small section of the tail wing floating on the water, sinking and floating, indicating that the plane did not leave at full speed, but did have an accident. What happened in the cabin? The loud noise and muffled gunshots. What did Ding and the woman encounter? A series of accidents. Let us discuss in the end, at least not to go to the boat together. It's better to send someone to have a look first. Looking at the two of them is not as good as me, and I am more complete, so I naturally told her to stay in place, and I went to the boat to have a look. Li Hong grabbed me and said, "No, you are not well, or I'll go. I think I'll be fine. I can definitely handle it." I said with a smile, "Come on, how can I be a big man? Shrink back. Let you go on an adventure. And besides, you are a woman who does literary work in the army, not as good as me, a veteran soldier. Don't argue. I'll go, and you just stay here obediently." Li Hong blushed and let go of her hand, saying, "Go quickly. There are so many words." I was just being polite. I was a bit out of breath, and the little girl could still do this, which was unexpected. Before leaving, I looked at Gu and saw that his fingers were white with anxiety, and I didn't know what he was worried about. Running to the foot of the mountain, the boat that was moored in the reef was still a bit far from the shore. Although I was a bit regretful about my clothes that I just tried, I had to dive in quietly and swim over to take a look. When I was close to the boat, I took out my knife and climbed up slowly. After the gunshot in the cabin, there was no sound. At least after I climbed onto the boat, everything was still quiet. Dean's several packages that were brought down were still lying on the deck. I didn't go to check them and went straight to the cockpit. I thought if there was any accident, it must have happened in the cockpit. Dean was also startled and hastily withdrew his hand and took 2 steps back. I was very surprised in my heart, looking at Gu's performance. It seemed that he was frightened to a faint in extreme fear. In other words, he was scared to the point of fainting. Was my coach Deng's unconsciousness also caused by such a fright? What were they squatting there looking up at? Li Hong and Shen Huan ran over to help Gu up. After a while of tossing, they stood up disappointedly and said, "Gu has fainted. His breathing is still there, but I'm afraid he won't wake up for a while." The sky gradually darkened, and the water surface was very calm, but the 4 of us began to get a little agitated. The cockpit where Gu hanged himself, we moved cabinets and debris to block the broken door tightly. Subconsciously, no one believed that Gu would choose to hang himself after entering, but no one was willing to go into that cabin to explore, because this matter was too eerie and inexplicable. After blocking the door, I felt uneasy in my heart, because both Ding and I are experts in driving this boat to return to the mainland. We must sail now. Due to the dead spider and the bizarre suicide by hanging, we have blocked the door, and we feel that we have cornered ourselves. Perhaps we have to open the cabin door to escape at dawn tomorrow. But Gu is still unconscious, leaving us completely in the dark about the navigation route. In the quiet darkness, Shen Huan and Li Hong both began to dance off, and Ding and I huddled together to smoke, trying to suppress the unease in our hearts through the clouds of smoke. I carefully went through it again, and was very worried about the abnormal changes in my eyelids. God knows if this change is the beginning of some kind of disease. It would be too unfair to be left with any lifelong disability. Ding finally understood that I wanted to dive down personally to figure it out. After all, we have been dealing with diving for so many years. After understanding the problem, we started to consider our equipment issues. The salvage command on the shore, after seeing that we did not return and could not contact Zhangjian by radio, was worried about something happening. The military district immediately sent a helicopter for search, so Ding took the opportunity to get on the plane and brought in not enough diving equipment. The diving suits and oxygen bottles were all very tight. If Shen Huan didn't insist on coming to watch the excitement, maybe only ones that would be brought in Ding was naturally willing to dive with me, so we discussed for a while and decided to dive down at dawn, leaving the two women to stay on the boat for the time being. If it's very dangerous after diving, the two of them won't take the risk and will wait for rescue on the spot. After chatting for a while, we guessed all kinds of situations underwater, and I was sleepy and downsy. At around dawn, there was a new change in the situation. The calm water surface was still windless and waveless, but it made a buzzing sound, irregularly vibrating our boat. When I opened my eyes, I found that Ding had already gotten up and was peeking over the side of the boat. What is this sound? I listened for a while and felt that the sound was very strange. It was a trembling water wave vibration caused by shivering, very dull and depressing, and it must have been transmitted from the deep bottom to the water surface. Could there be any water monsters? Ding and I are both veterans in the water, and don't believe at all that there are really water monsters in this world. I hesitated and said, "Oh, Ding, listen, does this sound like the sound of a motor running?" Ding said, "I think it's more like the whir of an engine, but it's strange how the sound seems to come from the bottom of the water." While talking, Li Han and Shen Huan also came over. The buzzing sound continued for a few more minutes and then fell silent, and I couldn't hear anything anymore. I yawned and said, "What's going on with this reservoir? Why is it always making a fuss when it's about to dawn? Isn't it tiring?" I didn't sleep well again. I turned my head to look at Li Han and wanted to say a few more words, but I was taken aback by her appearance. The little girl seems to have woken up early, changed into clean clothes, and washed her face. Compared with yesterday, she looks a lot more spirited, which surprises me. The little girl's hairstyle, a long head of hair, has been cut off, and the back is messy like a man's, with the bangs on the forehead, all combed up to the top of her head and fixed with some kind of hair wax. If I had this hairstyle, I would definitely be comparable to the image of a traitor in the movie. But the little girl's move looks very spirited and refreshing. Li Han saw me staring at the top of her head, and Ding also had a look that wanted to laugh but didn't dare to laugh. She looked a bit embarrassed, lowered her head, and said, "It's nothing." I asked Shen Huan to help me cut my hair. Long hair is in the way, and I'm going to dive into the water. I feel that I can't have long hair. Ding and I immediately said in unison, "You also want to dive?" "That's not possible." Li Han said, "Why not? Huanni was poison for me, and I heard you discussing diving to explore the truth. I can't just stay on the boat and watch over Gu, can I?" I quickly defended myself. "I'm not poison at all. It's just a wild guess. Ding and I were just discussing it. Anyway, today we're just waiting for the rescue. It just happens that he has some equipment, and it's a pity to waste it. We'll go down and take a look. If something's wrong, we'll come back immediately. We don't have the ability to explore the truth. The gas cylinder is not very sufficient either. Besides, diving must be done after professional training. Otherwise, you're not helping. You're causing trouble." Li Han smiled confidently. "You don't have to dive. I think you should also consider the stone mountain. Why dive into the water instead of climbing the mountain?" Zhang Jian and his group have been gone for a day and a night and hadn't come back. There must be something going on with this mountain. If you really need to dive, I'll come back. Shen Huan was obviously not as bold as Zhang Lihan. Yesterday's spider and Gu suicide scared her quite badly. She had recovered after a night's sleep. At this moment, hearing that Li Han was going to dive with us, she immediately became anxious. "That's not possible. I absolutely can't stay on the boat alone. Gu is in that condition, and I can't handle it." I looked enviously at Shang Lihan's refreshing face, and my heart had long flown to the clouds, not knowing what good things I was thinking about. Hearing Shen Huan's words, I said unconsciously, "Then let's all go. Don't worry, with me and old Ding here, there will be no difficulties." As soon as I finished speaking, I knew it was inappropriate. I had boasted too much, not to mention that the two of them might not understand diving at all, which would mean I had armed them. Even if they did understand, with the current equipment, it's not enough for people to dive together. I was really old and muddled, with such good conditions. Li Han must have had a partner long ago, and I was still daydreaming. Sure enough, Ding also glared at me angrily. I cleared my throat guiltily and said, "Wait a minute. I didn't mean that we were all going together. I meant that old Ding and I will go down first to check the situation, and then come back to make a plan. We can't make random decisions now." "Okay, that's what I said. Old Ding, you go and get ready. Shen Huan, you go and get something to eat. And Comrade Xiao Zhang, you tell me again, what else about Zhang Jian and his team do we not know?" Ding looked at me and immediately understood that I wanted to get close to Zhang Lihan. He took Shen Huan away and said meaningfully to me, "Comrade Old Huan, sometimes principal issues still need attention." Looking at Zhang Lihan, I couldn't help feeling a bit awkward, but Lihan took the lead and said, "Zhang Jian and his team of more than a dozen people. In fact, I'm not very clear about what they went to do. I only know that they have instruments that can detect the traces of the target. And also when we were separated, I heard someone shouting about an airplane, and it didn't quiet down until the gunshots. It was so dark that day. I really can't say anything specific. Yes, my thinking followed what Li Han said and turned to the stone mountain. In a day and a night, how could so many people not make a sound if they were born with a bad heart? I really don't believe it. At most, they were just executing orders. But how many secrets did the person who issued the orders know? Looking at Zhang Lihang, I simply stopped thinking about so many whys and stabilized my emotions, saying, "Old Ding and the others haven't prepared the meal yet. Let's chat casually." Lihang took a sensitive look at me, lowered her head, and said, "Okay, let's chat." Seeing her like this, I had nothing to say, so I had to laugh casually and ask, "Comrade Xiao Zhang, I remember you said you were also a soldier. So how did you become a soldier? Does anyone in your family serve in the military?" Li Han sighed. "I knew you would ask this. Why do strangers always bring up this question? It's normal for women to be soldiers. My father and brother are both from the military. I grew up in the army almost from childhood. It's natural to do a literary job." I nodded. "Oh, I see. Don't tell me your father is a senior official. I look at you and see that you are a revolutionary who takes the lead in doing things. You really lack a bit of ruffian flavor. You are a good seedling." At that time, the higher-ups had just issued an order to restore the rank system, but there were no specific regulations yet. I smacked my lips and lamented. "I don't know what rank you will get after the order comes down. Alas, old Ding and I don't think about it. We don't have that fate." Li Han smiled. "Don't guess all day long. You're retired and still care about so much." I was infected by her smile and couldn't help but laugh. "So, Comrade Xiao Zhang, you really have a big background. How about it? You are eager to try diving. Have you really practiced before?" Li Han stopped laughing and said seriously, "Of course, I never fight without confidence. Although I'm not a formal diving major, I have also put in a lot of effort. Especially I am very familiar with our military region submarines. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been assigned to the fisheries department to do some literary work." I really didn't expect that the seemingly gentle Li Han could have such skills. I was still skeptical. Just wanted to further explore the girl's hobbies. Ding dragged a pile of diving suits and oxygen bottles over, and in Shen Huan's hand, she was still holding lunch and meat cans. I saw the pro brand and immediately lost my appetite. Once you get tired of this stuff, it's hard to get interested again. Ding saw me frowning and not wanting to eat, and couldn't help scolding. "This is how the allies are fed. They are spoiled. Look at you. Don't hurry up and eat. Are you going to dive to die?" People who dive all know that the diet is particular, the so-called 3 highs, 2 appropriate, and 1 easy, in order to compensate for the great consumption of energy and vitamins in diving operations. It is necessary to eat more meat, fish, eggs, and fresh vegetables that contain a lot of protein, sugar, and vitamins. You can't eat foods that are easy to produce gas, because they will expand and cause abdominal pain during the decompression process when rising, such as beans, potatoes, soda, beer, and other foods, especially during the operation. You can't drink alcohol before diving, and even the night before the diving operation, alcohol should be prohibited. If I don't force myself to eat some now, it will be a drag when I really dive in. I had to reluctantly eat while muttering, "The stuff is not easy to digest. It's all the food of the army brothers. You, old Ding, are just fooling people with this stuff. Allies are allies, but we are the Navy." After reluctantly finishing eating, it was almost daylight as agreed before. Li Han and Shen Huan stayed on the boat to watch for the time being, and Ding and I dove in together to check the situation, which was not questioned. The water was not very cold. Ding and I had discussed before diving, and that we would first swim over the surface and try to bypass the stone mountain. When we were about to reach the place where the buzzing sound was heard last night, we would dive and save some gas. This old partner, who has worked together for many years, feels very close when diving together. Although there are many uncertain factors in the water, having a buddy to take risks together, that kind of full energy and fearless mood, is definitely not something that can be felt when alone. Ding and I were in such a mood, chatting and laughing, facing the rising sun, with masks, fins, flashlights, and fully armed. We swam to the back of the stone mountain. Of course, I was holding a knife in my hand, and Ding had changed to an underwater diving harpoon with a rotating illumination device at the front of the barrel. We both belonged to the type of people who are skilled and fearless of death. We refused to carry diving ropes and keep swimming towards the back of the stone mountain. Along the way, I dove into the water several times to carefully check if my eyelids were affected, but I was pleasantly surprised to find that although it was not as abnormal as gills, there was an advantage. The diving mask had become redundant. The unexpected eyelid formed a thin protective film in the water, and I could see clearly in the water without wearing a mask, and my eyes were not as painful. I laughed and told Ding about this advantage, but he ridiculed me. Save it. That thing might be some kind of virus. Hey, I say, old Juan, look at you. You're so happy. Let's just go back. You can go to a big hospital for research. Maybe if you're lucky, you'll become a modern specimen, and I can take the kids to visit for free. Just say in advance, Uncle Juan can't charge admission. This made me gasp for breath, but I had no way to argue. Thinking about the tragic death of the Joe man in the dark cave, it was probably caused by a virus outbreak. I was even more overjoyed, and the joy in my stomach popped and dissipated. I lowered my head and swam hard without saying a word. Ding felt sorry instead. I was just joking with you, old Juan. Can you take it? What's the rush? We're together, and we'll investigate all the demons and ghosts. Don't worry, your business is my business, and I won't let you end up alone. However, this conversation has already dispelled our playful mood, and we are now determined to show our skills and investigate what the Russian old man has done. After bypassing the stone mountain, I turned my head to look at Li Heng and Shen Huan, who were still standing at the bow of the boat. It was too far to see who was who clearly, but the figure of the girl inexplicably made me feel a little concerned. Perhaps, as long as people have experienced something unforgettable together, they will have a thought in their hearts. I said to Ding with some emotion, that little Shen has a good impression of you. Buddy, come on, settle down and start a family. I haven't found anyone yet. Ding smiled mysteriously. This can't be rushed. What we pay attention to is that things will naturally come to fruition when the time is right. You know, there's a layer of window paper between men and women. When neither of them breaks it, it's the most beautiful. Don't say, I really want to stay in this moment forever. You like me, I like you, but we just don't make it clear how beautiful. I looked and couldn't see the two girls anymore and said unkindly, you should also save it. You are the most unregulated person in our team. Don't pretend to be pure here. When Ding just reacted and was about to refute me, we were both stunned by the scene in front of us at the same time. On the back of the stone mountain, there was also a concave shape, like tiles facing in. This damn peak must not have looked like this when it wasn't filled with water. There was a big gap on the other side that we swam over, and I didn't expect the back to be like this, but the curvature on the side was much gentler. My first feeling was that I knew where the swamp came from. Watching those TV shows, there are scenes of icebergs collapsing, a large iceberg falling into the sea and drifting along. I think the swamp I encountered is likely to have fallen off the mountain like this, because on the stone mountain, there are some very steep cliffs. The ankle looks like a piece has been cut off recently. Ding and I were both a bit dizzy. What's going on? Zhen Jian and his gang can't be that capable, can they? To save the oxygen bottle, I also floated on the water to carefully see if there were any traces of human activity on the mountain. Ding was first to dive down to check and feel the general situation, clearing the way for our big counterattack. I squinted for a while and didn't find any movement, but Ding hurriedly emerged from the water, grinning and taking a while to make it clear, saying that as soon as he dived to the bottom, he got injured as soon as he got close to the stone. I quickly grabbed him and saw a blood stain on the shoulder of this guy, which had cut through the diving suit, but the injury was not serious. Just a skin injury, Ding said embarrassedly. No one else's fault. It's really ridiculous. I gave myself a fish gun. What's going on? I was quite skeptical. With Ding's courage and attention to detail, could he give himself a fish gun? Ding continued. It's not really, how to say it. I just dived down not very deep. At most 7 or 8 meters deep, I saw the bottom of the stone mountain hidden in the water, which was nothing much, but there were many strange mushrooms growing. Compared with the mushrooms we eat in the hot pot, they are much taller and thinner, with the top full of sediment in the water. I don't think these things are natural, so I casually shot at it, but I didn't expect the fish gun to bounce back and scrape my arm. It's really unlucky. After hearing the story, I was both angry and amused. What a thing. I took out the tape and tightly wrapped Ding's arm with a few turns. There was no other way. It would be too embarrassing to go back to the boat for bandaging now, and the injury was not serious, completely bearable. The mushrooms mentioned by Ding piqued my curiosity, and one after another, we dived down to see what was going on. At a depth of 7 or 8 meters, in the dark water, I saw the base of the stone mountain, which had not reached the bottom, but it was a bit more gentle than the top. In the less deep mountain stones, there were indeed slender mushrooms extending out, similar to enoki mushrooms, about 1 meter and 80 centimeters tall, each slanting upwards, pointing to the sky. What is this thing? Ding and I flanked from left and right, gripping our weapons tightly, and when we got closer, I found that these slender tubes were too tightly side by side, with a slightly thicker cap on the top. Judging from the straightness of the tubes, they could not be natural. There were some water plants and other debris hanging on them. Floating in the water, swaying, and they did not look like living animals. Full of doubts, I continued to swim a little closer to see the top of the two long tubes.